KCI Kindled, Creating Space for Meaningful Dialogue, a podcast brought to you by Kahnawake Collective Impact. The goal of this podcast is to open up a safe space for community members to have conversations about current social issues, both intercommunity and global issues, culture and heritage, and language. This space encourages respectful expression of different opinions and perspectives. The opinions and perspectives expressed belong to the guests of the show and do not represent the views of Kahnawake Collective Impact, or KSCS Kahnawake. This episode's discussion contains sensitive subject matter. Please listen with discretion.
Have you ever been gaming or working online classes and your internet service constantly gets interrupted? First Nations Fiber is about to ensure that just won't happen again. Get ready for high speed at a new level. Click on fnfiber.com and sign up today. First Nations Fiber, empowering people through connectivity.
Welcome back, everybody. I am Karina Peterson, and this is, I believe, it's episode number 5 of the Men's Health series podcast, KCI Kindled, Creating Space for Meaningful Conversation. We are networking and collaborating with KSCS on this project, and a bunch of willing, awesome community members are also part of this project. And I just want to introduce everyone here at the table today. Let's start counterclockwise. We have Codey.
Hi, I'm Codey, and coming in peppy and joyful and just real appreciative today.
Awesome. And next we have
David. So yeah, today I'm, appreciative of especially the beautiful sunshine outside. But there's also a shade of tiredness, like sleep was harder to find this week. There's a lot like going into my mind that was kind of harder to settle my thoughts and find focus. So that's a bit where I'm standing. So some kind of like half and half state.
Half and half. Yeah, it's pretty accurate. And we have
Brent.
Hi, Brent.
Hello. I think I had my therapy session like 2 hours ago, and so there's still like this sense of tenderness that's here, and especially knowing what we're about to talk about, there's maybe a little bit of like apprehension, like I don't know if I want to talk about that, but I will.
And since we just kind of did a bit of a check-in here, we have everyone sort of in a good mood, a little bit apprehensive just because of the content. For myself today, I also had a counseling session this morning, but I like had to cut it short because my life has just been like really busy, really, really, really busy. But I'm still, I'm trying to like hang on to those things that I know that I fundamentally need to keep myself well while all this busyness is happening. And I'm recovering from a cold, so you could probably hear it a little bit in my voice today. I'm a little nasally. But the sunshine, like the sun has such a great effect on me. I'm someone who's like extremely influenced by the weather. So like those cloudy, cold, dreary, rainy days are not, they're not a vibe for me. It's a vibe, but a very low vibe for me. So the sunshine is a really...
And we had a lot lately of these like rainy, gray days. So It feels really nice.
Yeah, it's awesome. You could actually see the colors outside. Like the red of the building just outside is beautiful right now. So I appreciate that today. And I'm also very peppy and focused, and also a little bit apprehensive just because of the subject for today's topic. So I guess we should, okay. So I want to introduce this topic slowly, and then the conversations leading up to it before we really, really get into it. So this has been on our general discussion topics from like the very first brainstorm that we had for this podcast. And it's on violence and aggression. And like our world is plagued with this everywhere. And it's genderless and it's ageless and it's just, it's here. Violence and aggression exists, and it exists a lot in our community, specifically in various forms like bullying, domestic violence, sexual violence.
Has many faces.
Yeah, a lot of faces. But we started the first few episodes sort of just like shallow waters, you know, like just I mean, the subjects that we talked about were like super important. We talked about vulnerability. We talked about like job and career choices and relationships and all kinds of really important things. And we've sort of just been trying to ease our way into this more difficult subject matter of violence and aggression. And we had a couple of like brainstorming group discussions outside of the podcast office. I just want to recall that one meeting where we were talking about it and everyone was really, really emotional and heightened and expressive and even angry. Like I remember Codey like actually saying, I'm kind of pissed today because of certain events that have happened in the community over the weekend that time. And like, so I just want to like, where am I going with this? I want to like debrief these things. Like if we think about certain recent events that may have happened or like campaigns that may have happened and triggered a bunch of people, like I just sort of want to start off with that. Codey, maybe you could talk about like that meeting and like when you got up and you were, well, you didn't stand up actually, but to me in my mind you were like and it was like an important moment because it sparked so much discussion. So
yeah, and that was probably one of the first times in my life to be that vulnerable to a lot of people that I'm not connected to in personal ways to express feeling. Yeah, and I felt angry because of all the events that were happening and all the violence, all the I guess events, through campaigns or whatever it may be, because I felt that I was failing, the male population because I'm so passionate about supporting men and to find quicker solutions and alternatives for men to not resort to violence or different sorts of aggression and outbursts. I felt like I wasn't doing my part quick enough. So I became frustrated and angry on beating myself up and saying like, well, you're not moving quick enough. You're not, you're not meeting the supply and demand at a rapid speed or pace. And, being there and, walking in a lot of men's shoes of, the bar fighting and fights in the street and being jumped and all these different situations, I participated and I also was on the receiving end of a lot of those things, and the end results were, back of police cars, overnight in the drunk tanks and everything else, right? So I just kind of want to see change in a sense of doing something good with that anger and frustrations and violence, right? I mean, there's not always, but I think I want to be that positive example to showcase that, there's much more than punching somebody's face or lateral violence or bullying and all these different things where it's okay to be human.
mm-hmm.
Because growing up, I seen a lot of violence, whether it was in my home, aunties, uncles, in the street, hockey. I played a lot of hockey growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Endured a lot of racism, a lot of, fighting on the ice, high school, middle school, bullying and all this stuff where got to experience both ends of that. And today I got one good fight left in me, and I want to save that fight for when I really need it. Because, me punching your face or doing whatever isn't going to resolve what's going on with me internally. And, some of the topics that we're going to talk about and that violence and aggression is solely based on me because of those demons of being jealous, envious. And again, we come back to these terms that are repetitive, the shame, the guilt, self-sabotage, isolation. These are a lot of things that men beat themselves up about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm jealous because Brent and David have facial hair and I struggle growing what I have. Some go as far as, physique, muscles, abs, all these different things where men, well, the hell with that guy. I'm going to punch his face because I can't have that, instead of
Okay.
redirecting that that fear or anger and aggression towards somebody else that you're jealous of or whatever, and putting that into yourself and doing the work and to see positive outcomes or outcomes in general will kind of change in the narrative, right? I think anyway, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you guys want to chime in and see where this picture takes us.
Yeah, there's something that you've said earlier that resonated with me because it is very human. We're not saying that experiencing anger, rage, powerlessness, shame, guilt, that this will never happen. This is not what we're talking about. I think what we're talking about is like what you do with these emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And that punching someone's face might provide some form of short-term relief, but I'm not sure, like, morally how you're gonna, like, where are you gonna place that in terms of relating to yourself and how you see yourself. And what you're referring to is addressing the cause of what creates or leads to these emotions. And I think there's a better chance that when you do that, well, you might not experience the same situations in the same way. So let's say that, being jealous of someone's physique, I guess the easiest guess is to say that it's out of like maybe some wounds around self-esteem. Addressing that will make you less vulnerable to the same situations. You'll feel better about yourself. And when you feel better about yourself, you're less jealous and less envious.
Yeah.
Because you don't feel that you're lacking something or that you're lesser than.
Mm.
And that's one of the things that I can think of right now about what you referred to as doing the work. But of course, like it's I don't think we've ever said, because it wouldn't be the case. It's not an easy work to do. It requires a certain form of restraint too, because quick discharge of like an intense emotion can feel like it's easier.
And I think on the on the other hand of that, of like jealousy or having anger towards somebody because of X, Y, and Z, let's continue with the body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we might be upset because we can't be in as good a shape as the next person to us, but not realizing and understanding the problems that they may be struggling with. Right? Maybe there's eating disorders or X, Y, and Z to keep them in that type of high maintenance and into the gym on a certain degree, right? So it's I think that's more of your guys's.
But it's also maybe a misunderstanding in terms of fitness and physique, because like fitness people work really hard for that, but it's not out of anybody's reach to learn. So it's like
there's that too. It's a question of it can also be a question of your priorities and what you decide to put forward.
I just want to bring it back just for a second, because like Codey talked about something. He mentioned something that struck out to me as pretty important, and it actually came up in that meeting too, is that like, because of the nature of the work that we all do here sitting at the table, we're all in the business of trying to help people, right? Creating healthier, stronger, more resilient, happier people. Everyone's nodding their head here. So like, clearly, yeah, that's what we're all here for. So like, I'm not a counselor or anything like that. So I'm not like helping people in that manner, but just everything else in my life, it's a passion of mine. I want to see my community get better. And I think we're all like-minded here as well. So when you had mentioned that, like, as somebody who works really hard in trying to make changes in the community, and then to see these instances of violence continuing to happen, like in the extreme cases of aggression where people are, need medical treatment or people are getting jail time for it, like that, it makes you really upset, especially like as a male, because some of the incidences involve males, and like you're trying to really help people with it, and it is kind of disheartening, like if things keep happening and you're like, well, like what you just said, right? Like, I'm not working hard enough, or there's more that we could be doing, or how come this isn't working, or how come the message isn't getting across. And I just kind of want to say that, like, just you mentioning that kind of shows that it is getting across.
Mm.
Because you also mentioned too that that was like one of the first times you were vulnerable in front of another group of people that are not like your friends and your family. So like to be able to express that in front of everyone and then have all the other guys at the table express the same sentiment, like that was electric, that was.
And congrats, by the way, Codey, because it requires a lot of courage to do that.
Mm.
And I'll dare to say, perhaps, especially in this community, would you say? I know that because for myself, I'm not from here, and it really depends what the crowd is, right?
Mm.
And especially if it's with a bunch of other guys, I'll probably monitor what I'm saying, right? But maybe even though, the group that was present were not family and friends or close friends, you felt that, there was enough safety to just own up and share that.
Yeah. Well, at the same time, I'm starting to learn and experience a little bit more. It's easier to walk the talk and not just talk. So if I'm going to be helping people one-on-one or being some sort of helper figure in a community or wherever, right? I mean, I have to be on the up and up and have the courage and strength
Mm-hmm.
or to be strong enough at least to walk my talk. It's not the intent to push my beliefs or values or anything on individuals. It's simply me practicing what I preach. But yeah, no matter where I am, whether it's here in the community, Montreal, wherever, I've experienced so much different name calling in different situations where, are you really worth it? Or is this really worth that? Sometimes it is. It's tempting. But what I've also learned was, call me what you want to call me, but just don't call me late for dinner. And that's kept me pretty reluctant and not facing any sort of judge or jail time. So and that's and that for me and sharing that's my contribution to positive examples that many don't have.
What I hear as well from what you're saying is a care, and there's a part of me that hopes that that's what these conversations are allowing for us to open, like art that cares about this. When I was listening to what you were saying in the beginning of this conversation, it had me thinking about this on a global scale and how good. I feel like saying we, but I can talk just for me, how good I am at not caring about those things. Bombs dropping all over the place, people dying every day, every hour, every minute. And I'm worried about what's for dinner kind of thing, And so at least in this hour and a half, there's this hope that we can turn on that button that says care about these things, and that we can keep it on and have a conversation with that somewhere.
I had an experience recently. I run a teen CrossFit program at the gym, and we are mostly males in the class. We do have like a good number of females too, but like we went on a trip recently, and we went to Kirkland, Point Claire area to ISO, the trampoline jumping place, still fitness related, and it was really sad actually, because like here we have all these strong kids and we're teaching them, be proud of who they are. There's self-esteem involved in it. There's like resilience involved in what we do at the gym. And like, they're all really awesome kids. So then we go to this place and they're met with racism and like comments. I mean, it's very clear that we're a bunch of res people, right? Because all the boys have their braids and like we're clearly res folks. So but it's just really sad that like we had the specific group of kids that the interaction was with is also a minority group. So like they were, it takes two to have an interaction. So like our kids, their kids, but all these racist remarks were going back and forth, and they were French speaking. So that's a whole other layer of violence on top of all of that. And our kids were getting like really like you could see the rage building inside. And Like I'm lucky that I work with John and I work with another JD sailor, and they were along. Well, they're like my children, right? So like you don't mess with mama's kids, and I'm like right in there, ready to fight for them. I'm like, come here, but not actually. I never hit anyone in my life, but yeah, like I'm standing up for these kids. I speak a little bit of French, so I'm talking to the staff at ISO, and we're figuring it out, right? Like I'm the voice for them because they're all just gonna beat each other up otherwise. But so I'm doing that as my part, but then the JD and John, the other coaches, were talking to the kids on the side to calm them down, I guess, right? And like, listen, you guys are strong. You all know you're super strong. Like, use your strength right now. And like, yes, it sucks. Yes, it hurts, but let it go for now. And let's just like have a good time before they kick us out.
Yeah, right.
And so we made a deal. They made a deal. Like those kids would stay there, and then if any of our kids approached, they would separate, like stay on separate sides of the facility, so no further interactions could happen. And like, but we had one student with the braid, and he was like really, really, really upset, and it like completely ruined his whole night. So I kept like, talking to him, like, listen, like you're stronger than them right now just because you're holding back and you're telling me that you're upset. I know that you're upset. So that's amazing that you're telling me this, And like it did sort of ruin the rest of his night. But like it was a really sad experience that we went through that there. But at the same time, it was really empowering for them to not break out in that aggressive violence, let's beat everybody up thing. Because on the bus, on the way home, like on the way there, they all sat in separate seats. And then on the way home, they were all jumping in together and laughing and bonding. And the bus was super loud on the way home, but it's because they just went through this really gross experience together and they did not choose the violence route, so they were able to sort of hold it back. But again, they have 3 people that are holding their emotions for them, so like they had support there to help guide them through this really awful situation. So like it was a really good experience at the same time as how sad it was too. So there's a whole bunch of like small little issues that we could pick apart this experience, right? Because that other minority group also experiences violence. So maybe they're internalizing that. And, there's all different kind of ways that you could pick that apart. But my point in bringing this up is like the rage that came with it. And I even have it written here, powerlessness and rage. So like, I could see that our kids, by not exploding and beating everybody up, are thinking that maybe they lost a little bit of power. So that's why that one kid was like raging all night. You know what I mean? So like, I guess my question here, because I do have a question, is like, what is your take on this? Like for an interaction to turn violently, physically aggressive, what does it take to get to that point? And does it have anything to do with this feeling of powerlessness?
Doesn't take much is the answer I would give, unfortunately.
And one thing I'm noticing that you did is that you helped the kids to deal with the insult. And I feel like you've provided them with kind of a model by telling them that there is more strength in that restraint, in not acting out on that rage. So that perhaps it provided some form of support for the ego, for their egos and their self-esteems that were being assaulted by these racist comments. And without that support, it would have been much, much more difficult. And that peculiar kid that had it like rougher, it probably would have been way worse for him.
Yeah.
But there needs to be something to compensate in a way. Like I could imagine, like I was listening to what you were saying, trying to put myself in their shoes to the extent that I can. And I've known these experiences myself, not the same triggers, not the same situations per se, but that sense of being insulted and not having done anything, quote unquote, not having done anything, because not acting out on it is definitely doing something, and not wanting to reconduct or entertain or like put gasoline on the fire is definitely doing something.
But then Brent is saying that it doesn't take much. So like,
doesn't take much to act out on it. I think that's
that's what I mean. So what can we do to, lengthen that that time it takes to react so quickly?
Lengthen the fuse.
Yeah.
That could be an image we could use.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about talking and educating, right? Because a lot of the violence when it comes around racism and standing the forefront to protect and go to any length to prove people wrong is to me it's a learned behavior, because historically that's what we have obtained. That's what's been imposed on us. And again, it comes back into that intergenerational trauma of violence, whether it was locally fending off hunting territories or different villages or migration. Then the ships arrive, we learned more violence, to protect what's ours, maintain and salvage the little bit of peace and prosperity that the villages or communities had. Then, the French and Indian Wars, the fur trade, Hudson Bay, the integration and migration of mixed marriages, and into, the early 90s, we look at all the violent events and situations that happened in Indian country, the 70s, you look at Wounded Knee, and that's not to discredit like the battle at Bighorn and all those historical and meaningful time periods or situations that Indian people had participated in. But the events like Wounded Knee in 1973, there was a lot of people from the community here and across Turtle Island that had participated, where now you're dealing with the FBI, CIA, different military backgrounds, being shot at in exchange of, 1981, over 500 Sûreté de Québec or SQ police officers had raided Listigouche, the incident at Restigouche where the Quebec government tried to prevent the Mi'kmaq community of harvesting or fishing salmon, where there was another assault of violence on, a peaceful community, peaceful peoples. Kanesatake, 1990 here, Kanawage, 1990, violence. 98, there was more violence, Kanyage, Moss Lake, all these different situations and events where there's more violence. But the pretty thing about violence in those types of situations, it brings out the unification, the collectiveness, where the animosity between you and I that we had in the Edgewater over whatever reason is now at bay.
You mean the one where I tossed a beer bottle at your head? Like,
sure. Yeah, sure.
Did not actually happen. Just putting that out there.
Yeah. But now it's at bay, and that the enemy's on the outside now. The enemy is looking inside. Mm. And we carry that mentality still today, where the outside's still our enemy. Yeah, for sure, for many reasons. But instead of doing it in a proper way, which is why education is important. And when I talk about education, it's not having that formal education from an institution. It's how to be diplomatic. It's how to understand those politics, and to show the outside that we're far more beyond angry people, where because the federal and provincial government's not listened to me or banned offices or whatever, I'm going to jump 10 feet in the air and use that aggression, anger, and frustration, go out drinking and fight among my own people. And the outside sees that. It's working. We gave you all these mechanics and mechanisms. And for me, because I like to overthink and analyze things, that Campbell Scott's powerful quote about, absorbing the Indian into the body politic wasn't just meant for that time period. It still continues today, where the governments and these foreign entities still see a lot of First Nation, Inuit communities struggle with these types of things, where you're absorbing yourself into that body politic They just give you the instruments. There you go. And that's why a lot of our people, that grew up in the culture or reformed and learned a lot about the culture and continue to live in that way of life, say that alcohol and drugs is not meant for you. We can't handle alcohol and drugs. And we knew that from the moment that it was introduced to us in those big barrels. And today, lawyers and those types of professions, they call that imperialism, which is another extension of loss of land. Mm-hmm. So when you lose a big parcel of land, culture or identity, what are most likely the two things that are going to come up? Anger and violence. So it's something that's, I think, instilled in us. I could be wrong. I'm just an average Joe. I don't got much of an education, but it's just food for thought, right? I mean,
after you just gave us like this super elaborate history lesson.
I think you've got more education than most, Codey.
Yeah.
And you're pointing, as I think you often point to, the complexity of this. We could even go further back and see how just the fact that violence was a response in those moments means that it was already ingrained even before that, you know, and that's just, it's one of the ways that there is oppression, right? Like just having, so this comes back to your question, like how do we lengthen that fuse? It feels like just this huge question because it is such an old system. The way that we have internalized the use of violence as a way to have power, and to see, like, there's a little bit of sadness in this, to see how it's so good, quote unquote, that it even gets people to band together around violence, and there's like some sense of pride in that. It just shows how it's working. How this system is working to even have us convinced that this is actually a way to be together around violence. There's something truly sad about that, and we see that all over the place. I mean, so the education is really, like you're saying, it's not a school education that is needed. It's really a education around what I don't know. I'm not even going to get this right. I'm not even going to try to get this right.
Go for it, man. Try it.
I'm not. It really feels like it just needs three little dots, and there's something about complexity there. And what is strength really?
Well, I'm going to jump in here and probably an unpopular opinion, but I wonder, like, if we take the word violence, like violence has an opposite, right? And like, what's the opposite of violence and aggression? It's kindness and caring and compassion. So they can't exist without the other. There has to be a balance. Like if violence didn't exist, we wouldn't have a need for compassion. So like in my mind, I'm thinking that I don't even know if I own this opinion, but this is just where my thought process is going. But I don't see violence as always particularly negative. Because like in that story I just brought up about our kids facing violence, look at all the good that came out of it. And then you both mentioned that people band around violence, and my kids connected and banded around a violent situation. But I guess the difference is that it did not escalate into something extreme. Like nobody got physically hurt. So like, again, just for sake of putting this out there, is violence always a bad thing? Or is it the way people express violence? Like reactionary responses, aggressive physical behavior, like is it always bad? Because you could have a really great reaction to violence, and like you were saying, like that people had to kind of band together to defend territories. So in that sense, being violent in a state of defense, is that a bad thing? Like say if I were walking down the street and I got jumped by somebody and I'm defending myself by acts of violence, I'm going to beat the crap out of anyone who does that to me. Is that necessarily a bad thing? So there's a bunch of different ways to look at the word violence and aggression. Like it's very, very triggering to see it. And it's a very like harsh word. Like when I think of it, like my visual of the word violence is like lots of red and orange because of color theory, and like lots of really aggressive lines or something around it because it's really that triggering. But is the vocabulary always bad, or is it just all the things that happen around it? Like, can we take violence and somehow flip it to make it less explosive and less extreme?
Sure. I mean, not too long ago, I, had an anger episode where I didn't know how to refrain. And instead of walking out my door and just having a cigarette and coffee, I had a shouting match and became violent and kicked the dog cage, which frightened everybody, children, my wife, everybody got scared. Now, is that something I want to portray myself as? And it doesn't help that I'm like 8 feet tall and like 500 pounds and like the most noticeable Indian from 10,000 miles away, and it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess flipping the script and trying to make violence not seem so scary kind of comes into that protector's instinct. Lacrosse, for an example, I was on the coaching staff previous lacrosse season, and kids on the floor got the brunt end of the reffing and parents and everything else and name calling, and parents banded together to protect the children, which could have became a real violent situation. Mm-hmm. But violence did appear where there was shoving and name calling and what have you. But that just becomes basic instincts or natural instincts of protecting children or
defense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I also learned in my own therapy sessions was, she's like, Codey, you're a big guy. I was like, here we go, body shaming. Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm a big guy. And she's like, how come you always look like you're ready to fight? I said, I don't know. Just always watching out for my own. Like, stuff happens, And she's like, well, is anybody coming to beat you up? Is anybody waiting outside for you to fight? I was like, no. And she's like, okay, breathe.
So
I went from the fighting Irish
always wound up.
Just to like, yeah, how you doing? Have a good day. That's okay. Now my arms are free and I'm not doing the fighting Irish no more.
Where do you think that comes from?
There's really something just what I'm going to say has no reference to your size, Codey, but it's an image that was here even before this documentary about these, I think it's sea elephants. These things are gross when you look at them. Like they are the ugliest,
right?
Like, but they are huge.
Yep.
Just crazy huge. David's going to look it up. And there is aggression, right? The biggest one, if the other male tries to come, it's gonna show that aggression, but it's like over like that.
Yeah.
It's over. And then you see it and it's chilling on the beach, right? It's chilling on the beach. It isn't always ready for a fight. It is chilling on the beach. And it used that aggression to protect something, but we're talking about like these animals, right? Like there's a sense that it's almost like that what has been ingrained into us around the use of violence has us like sort of going in the wrong direction of evolution. Like when you're talking about using violence, it's the problem is that it doesn't just, it's not just okay, now I'm going to use this to protect whatever my life right now. It's never really that anymore. There's always this. It's often just a misuse.
Yep.
It's a misuse. Like you're talking about protecting yourself being jumped, yet, just talking about the war that's, wars obviously all over the place, but this war in Palestine, like these things that are going on and justified because of things that don't make any sense. The taking of life and the harming of others. We know this to not ever lead to unification.
Mm-hmm.
And we remain in this place of tension all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy. That spark, that fuse is always it's just so short when violence has to be the way to resolve whatever.
I'm gonna like touch on something that you said. Like I'm hearing with everyone here, we're talking about violence, but it's always paired with defense and protection.
Mm.
And like you just said, it's not always in defense anymore, but is it? Like if we take like an example of domestic abuse or bullying, for example, lateral violence. So if I'm, not happy with the way I look, but I decide to cut down Codey, is that like an aspect of self defense? Because like I'm protecting my own ego because somebody else, like deflection, like I kind of feel like those two are tied closely together. And I mean, again, it's all in the delivery, right? And maybe we're defending the wrong things with it.
That's what it feels like. There's these perceptions of danger, like you're talking about. The perception of my image and my value that I feel like I have to defend, versus like this story that I'm talking about, where these animals are defending their lineage, and their children, their lives, right? Like the actual life, not their like emotional life. And there's something there where there's an important difference, where there's a sense of threat, where the threat isn't necessarily towards my life, but perhaps towards something that I've built to define myself. Something that some might call the ego. There's a threat to that, and that's the thing, is that whatever that thing isn't actually real, which is why it is so fragile. And which is why this violence can just erupt at nothing, because of the fragility of what it is to be a man.
Yep.
And as soon as there's something that is threatening this idea of what it is to be a man, I'm not even conscious of that, then there goes up the defenses. And if aggression in the sense of violence is something that is accessible, which it is to all men, then it's going to be the thing that comes out.
I was just watching a video yesterday and a training that I went through, and it's Brene Brown. A lot of people are very familiar with her. She talks a lot about vulnerability and different things. But one of the quotes that she had mentioned was that, like with men, we talked about vulnerability before, right? Like it's really hard. The world doesn't support men being vulnerable for all the reasons, right? So she said that because that's not supported, the only two reactions when faced with a difficult situation or some kind of triggering situation is either to shut down or to physically lash out. And like Codey actually mentioned that once too, like when we were talking about relationships, and you were saying like with your partner, and like you come home after a long day and then she's harping on you to do something and you can't tell her like, hey, like I'm feeling this way. Can we do this tomorrow? Because she's going to get upset. So your options are to like, start a fight about it, just do it and be resentful, or punch a wall. Like those are the options, So it's like, is it really that much of a dichotomy? It's like where you literally just shut down and then just sit with the resentment, or you have to physically react? Like, is it?
Well, a big part of that is, and I think a lot of people struggle with it, not just men, but it impacts men a lot too, is not being emotionally available. Where it's
where you mean like men are not emotionally available, or people in your support group are not emotionally available to men?
Well, yeah, both ways.
Both ways.
In general, men are not emotionally available or physically available, or mentally available, because we're in our head so much that we're beating ourselves up and creating this unnecessary amount of aggression. Then once we let out that frustration and that hurt and pain that we're trying to identify in ourselves, it results in violent events. And when we talk about violence, right, it's not necessarily hands-on. It's a lot of verbal. I think a lot of verbal abuse, not so much physical, but not to discredit or disregard physical violence, and throughout those types of violence, whether in the least amount or the least one that's not talked about so much is the sexual violence, and that just clusters into a whole other component of the bullet points that you have,
Oh yeah, I
jotted
have
down, and
endless bullet points.
that impacts us, and because society has shown us that we have to prove a point in society or in life. You have to make a name for yourself, whether you could be the biggest, baddest, strongest guy, whether you can pick up car transmissions by yourself, whatever it may be, and you have to live up to that. Then that becomes generational. Your kids try to follow into that, your grandkids or even nephews, but it doesn't resolve what's going on in here or up here, because I really have to give a lot of credit to Brent for introducing me to a lot of this mindfulness concepts and understanding, how powerful and how in depth it goes, because we're never mindful of the next event that's going to happen.
That's true. Can't predict it'll happen.
So understanding that, or trying to understand it a little bit more, helps me become mindful with the words that I'm going to release. So I've learned that the hard way, because my words become violent, and when I let out those words, you can't call those words back. So it becomes a festering pot on top of the wounds that you're already struggling with, right, with your mental health, and you kind of just close that door. But once we continue closing these doors and not do the work, or try to do the work, or speak to somebody and get a better understanding of what's going on internally or mentally, we just continue with this behavior, and by the time the light flashes before our eyes, we're collecting a pension and sitting home being that miserable grandparent or whatever, right? Because we never have an opportunity or supports or resources to properly shine. And society has given us 2 types of tools, 3: alcohol, drugs, and the internet. When you start the addiction or that journey with addictions, with substance abuse or alcoholism, those are your 2 opportunities to showcase your talents. And what are some of the talents that you get to showcase once you're under the influence? Womanizing, fights, the list goes on.
Yeah, because all those things kind of enhance your feelings, right? Like they're what's the word? Like depressants. There's a word for them. They're downers.
Yeah.
All those things are downers.
Mm-hmm. And it comes around to the same thing with relationship, the womanizing part, where the sexual abuse, the dopamines, you take that away from someone that's addicted to the dopamines or the intimacy of sexual intercourse and those types of behaviors, you become violent, angry, frustrated because you're not getting what you need. And that's the same thing with people that struggle with alcoholism or substance abuse, right? And we become violent. We lash out, we do things, and we just create more chaos. We live in a world of chaos.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You talked about like the one or the other, Karina, just now. That question sort of, is it
shut down or explode?
Yeah, and we could make a link to being in control. Like there's this message that boys get, right? To be in control, and it's not said that way. It's said like, don't cry, stop crying.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just the beginning, right? But that, when we're at that age, crying is the emotional expression. So don't cry means don't have emotion. And so here's this message that's ingrained across so many cultures to little boys: be in control. And so shutting down is a way to be in control, and aggression and having power over somebody with the physicality is a way to be in control.
Mm-hmm.
And these are things that we're taught are right. That's what it is to be a man, is to be in control. And we're actually not in control of anything, because we're not a part of that 1% who rule the world. So, what's the alternative? These poles, these polarities that you're talking about are pretty quick solutions to, finding control in a world where you have actually none.
I'll give you something to cry about.
Yeah.
like again, bringing it back to like my teens and that interaction they had. I think we need to redefine these words a little bit, because power is not a negative word. There's just a whole bunch of negative connotations to it. And we talked about the patriarchy and things like that before. And like, it can be really, really, really toxic sometimes, the connotations around power, especially when it's abused. But like, we tried to we did redefine it with these kids by like actually telling them you have more power by maintaining your composure. So like that, they were able to control their own emotions. And again, control is not a negative word either, because it's all depends on like the actions that follow these words, right?
But I'm assuming that you allowed them to express these emotions, to talk to you about what they were feeling, right?
Yeah.
Because control, in the sense that Brent meant it, would have been don't go there.
Supportive
like,
environment.
Be better. Don't feel that anger. Don't feel that rage. You're better than these guys. Just bottle it up. So circling back to the question that you had, one thing that can be done, because there is an insult, there is an aggression that comes, it's going to generate powerful emotions. You need to have like the safest space possible to talk about it. So that these emotions can be expressed in a way, especially when you're younger, where you can't do that very easily on your own. And even for adults, we find ourselves in situations at times where we're pushed to our limits, where we also need a good friend, a partner, a therapist, a colleague to just say, wow, like this thing that just happened, like it really got to me, and I'm still, it sent me on a spin, and I'm still, okay, so and what is it that you're feeling? Well, this, and that. And just in the saying, and just in the expression of what you've been through, and having that validated by someone helps in diminishing like that, everything that was activated.
Like it.
So that's one possible outlet that is not in the range of violence and aggression. Talking about those feelings, sharing them, having like kindred spirits or other people seeing, yeah, that was really painful. Like, I can't remember where I saw that meme on the internet, but it said something like, never in the history of humankind having told someone to calm down ever worked.
It's true.
So,
it's true.
Like, when people are
I'm already triggered. I'm like,
oh, that's it. So when people are angry, like I remember when I had more of a psychotherapy practice, just saying like, you're really angry, or it seems like you're enraged, helps. And not like in a sing-song voice, like just acknowledging that this is the emotion that's there, especially for anger, which is the normal reaction to being treated unfairly, to injustice. So like, I've pronounced that horribly, but like, but so being heard already restores something, in the sense of like, it can help like heal that injury, that insult. At least you're being heard, and that's fair.
So it's what I'm hearing is that it's like the lack of coping skills, or a lack of like supportive.
Can be a lack of supportive figures, can be a lack of outlet in terms of actual people around you, but also like internal resources if you never got to practice them. So like what you did with these kids is an example of providing that structure, providing a different narrative, and allowing for a space to exist where they can say like, yes, this is really enraging. I don't like being told these things about who they think I am. And I feel very much that, like, I doubt that they would have used these words, but like, I'm trying to paraphrase the experience, like, of like feeling belittled, feeling that they're telling us that we're lesser than. All of that really hurts, and I want to fight back. Yeah.
Because like, well, with them not responding physically to all this stuff, like on the bus ride home, like they
needed to discharge a lot of energy there too, eh?
Yeah, but it was great though. Like they were laughing and they were all together, and they felt a sense of pride and strength together afterwards.
So if we look at it using like a metaphor that would use like neurology or like physiology, like this created a lot of like, it generated a lot of energy that needed to be discharged in a way. But they did that, like, where is it that I heard about that thing? we were using like examples with animals earlier. Animals who undergo trauma in the sense that they came very, very close to being successfully hunted by a predator. Some of these species, you observe them, they go through like a kind of a sequence after that. And they don't carry a trauma in the same sense that human beings can. They'll kind of shake it off. And then it's kind of like I think it's understood as the nervous system kind of resetting itself to kind of a baseline where things are maybe closer to what they were pre-insult, pre-assault, pre-aggression.
Mm-hmm.
So they did something with all of that energy that was brought up from the aggression from that other group.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really good point that you bring that up. Like through my own experiences and like being in therapy is having all that pent up energy and trying to de-escalate the emotion or even feel the moment or the emotions in the moment is doing something for myself. And that's what everybody forgets, right? We don't do anything for ourselves or anything that makes us happy. It's always like, well, forget me. I'm going to do something that makes David and Brent happy or X, Y, and Z. Then, all right. That kind of went away. So it becomes like this repetitive habit where we're meeting everybody else's needs except ours. Then we get upset because we're depleted or have no energy to do anything. And for me, meeting other people's needs and doing stuff for people is okay to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
If I take you over for supper and pay for supper, that makes me happy because I did something good. It's natural. But owning my own frustrations, my own anger, and my own attempts to violence is, putting that into something constructive. If I want to learn something about the language, I'll invest it in that. I'll learn a word or a structure of a sentence or the root words and what it means or a song or a little bit more about the history and the different origins and, the different entities of medicinal usage and stuff like that. So by the time I put in a half hour, 45 minutes, whatever it is, I feel better and I obtain new knowledge. Then when someone comes through those doors requesting for help or meet someone while I'm getting my bologna sandwich, it becomes reciprocity, sharing what I've learned to help somebody else, and then I feel good. And it's kind of like a pattern that I'm getting used to, because I've learned from a lot of people, and a lot of people that I've got to learn from were very strict and stern in their ways. They have a lot of anger issues and violent and what have you. But by going through that process and learning and experiencing those not so good experiences of trying to obtain new knowledge or understanding of a way of life, I got sick and tired of hearing, well, I had to go on the road and travel. I had to travel here to learn about this and learn that and that. So you have to get on the road and go learn this and go learn that and da, 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 da. So if I was to be that teenage person coming to learn something about the culture or whatever it may be, and to hear something like that is kind of disheartening and kind of just like, well, are we allowed to swear on here?
Yeah. Okay.
Like, all right, well, kiss my big brown ass and walk away. And so that's one less person that's gonna be able to showcase their positive traits, talents, or gifts and roles and responsibility that they can contribute into the community. And that's why like lateral violence is so shitty, because we're always discarding and discrediting so much raw talent and gifts in community. So then when we see these people doing the time, doing the crimes, doing all these different acts and whatever, is because all those big toy box of shitty words of shame, belittling, hopelessness, learned powerlessness, and all these things just keep them in their own little comfort zone of, well, today's Thursday. I'm going out and I'm fighting.
Thirsty Thursday.
Someone's going to endure something, but there's so much out there to reinvest that energy in and to explore different things. And, it's like we're stuck in this little box and we're scared of change. Why, or where does that come from? Why are we scared of change? Like, it's like the $1 million question of like, why does change affect me so much?
so growing that capacity, like you guys can't see, or you people can't see, but Codey's got his hands sort of like facing each other and making like a little box kind of thing. And it's like, there's this sense of what we're speaking about is growing a capacity.
There you go. Thank you.
And what you're talking about to me like brings the word care and values, and kindness and compassion, all these things that need to be cultivated. Yeah. Right. They're not just going to be available to us. We have to invest into them. And as we do that, as we live lives that make more sense, that are aligned with our chosen values, things that, that we actually intentionally, want to put forward in our lives, there's a capacity that grows as we are able to be more kind towards others and have more compassion towards others. The capacity grows. And bringing that back to this metaphor that David was speaking about with the physiology that needs to discharge, well, there's more of a container for that. Yeah. And so someone walks, by you on the street and hits your shoulder, and it doesn't trigger the what the fuck, because there's alignment in your life, and you can take that, and it can be just okay, and you can have access to, I don't know what's going on in this person's life. Like those other kids, they've also lived, discrimination. They are also oppressed. They are also having a shit time, and they don't have access to anything else other than this violence and these words. And the more that we can have access to that as a response, it allows this discharge to happen. And then we don't need to go to the aggression. We don't need to go to the violence. We can laugh. We can go back to the gym and do the things that they do, to be together. And then it's just gone. It's gone as an event, and no one went to jail.
Back to those sea elephants or whatever they're called on the beach.
There you go. Basking on the beach.
So a couple of important things that I noted in...
I don't look like an elephant.
A sea elephant.
No, he does not.
He's much better looking. Yeah. At least 2 times better looking.
Oh, thank you, David. Thank you. Well,
you can't make me laugh too much. I'm going to cough all over the microphone. But like everything that you guys have been saying, I've been like noting a couple of like key things that are just, literally connecting it all together is like we don't have anyone supporting that capacity for us to build that balance and the equilibrium that we need. Because when I think about violence and compassion now, I'm looking at it as a spectrum, like a seesaw spectrum, and we kind of need to be right in the middle, because neither are good or bad, they just are. And it's all the actions that determine the connotation of it. But I see like what we don't have currently is anyone to be that buffer for people, to be like, to validate the feelings, to validate the experience, to redefine these words for you, like power, not in the like you're going to rule everyone way, but your power is how you keep your composure, like as an example. So we don't have that in place. So how do we even attempt to build coping skills or other responses that are not reactionary without these things in place? And where I'm going with this is like, where do we learn our first bits of socialization? It's at home, right? So like if we're at home with our families and we're just witnessing violence all over the place, like the bad scenarios, and our parents don't have these tools to help support our capacities, then we're really not going to learn it anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's like, where do we get started?
With yourself?
Like with yourself.
Yeah.
But then how do we educate from here? Like, how do we help parents or give families the tools to be able to support each other here? But you're right. It comes back down to the individual.
Yeah. That's rites of passage and communications and validating feelings and emotion. You have to have that ability to do it yourself. Yeah. I could say, okay, you're feeling sad, okay, well, let's talk about that. Why are you feeling sad? But if you have that ability to have that conversation with yourself and understand it, you're far more ahead of the game than, I'm not trying to eliminate any kind of job, work myself out of the job, but in counseling, you could do that yourself.
Mm-hmm. It definitely helps to have somebody supporting the effort, but you can do it yourself.
Because if you can't have that conversation with yourself and speak to yourself on a very intimate way, it just becomes fraudulent or manipulation to yourself where, okay, but if you could truly look into that mirror or pick up a mirror and look at yourself and say, I love you, or talk to yourself or have a conversation while you're brushing your teeth or whatever you're doing, you're far more ahead of the game than you were yesterday or anybody else. Because once people start getting into needing somebody or having that codependency of having someone validate them or their feelings or whatever it may be, that person will never have any sort of understanding of what it is to truly be in those feelings and just be like, I'm going to call David or go see Brent because they validate me. But if you don't go out into the woods or wherever it is and to sit in your own discomfort or your own experience or having an experience in gratitude or solitude, you'll always need somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So taking the time to be in your own discomforts or going through that helps you and kind of eliminates the middleman. But it's also always good to have that conversation with yourself and to speak to others and reach out to others. This is like more job creation, but establishing that relationship, not only with yourself, but with others, and putting up boundaries, where you want to take this, how you want to take that, or whatever, right? And it comes back into our first 5 episodes of everything that we talked about, because those are the core foundations of who we are as a people. It's our foundation to our structure. And a lot of these things that we talk about, violence is just one of many windows on our home that's to be installed.
Mm-hmm.
And, to have that conversation, Codey, with yourself, I think you'd agree that it requires the conditions for that to be okay, and you talked about going out in nature, and nature always reflects to us that it's okay, right? Everything that is going on in nature is okay, right? It happens and it passes and it's a part of the seasons. And sometimes community, like the people community, also can let us know that that's the case, but maybe this is not so much, but if the community can also support us in the way of saying it's actually okay for these things to be, then I can have that conversation with myself much more easily, right? And then that's it. And then maybe I don't need there to be a specialist being the only one saying, "Hey, it's okay, by the way, for you to have this," because it's a part of what we understand as a community,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that person that hears you out doesn't need to be a therapist. It can be a friend or someone that that gets you, that you feel understood and heard with. Because to me, I think it's a mix of both. Like, we're not just to use like some images. Like, I feel like humans, we're not like cats that seemingly have maybe an easier time being independent and by themselves. And of course, there's a wide variety of cats and temperaments in cats, but
don't want to insult the cats.
So I feel like human beings, like there's both, like, of course, building up like your own coping, your own internal strengths, knowing yourself, having a good sense of purpose, meaning, self-esteem, all of that. But we're also very social animals, and we live, I think, to me, we live in a state of interdependence, and we can wish for that interdependence to be as healthy as possible. Yeah. I think what you were referring to is of course, like being like dependent on someone to manage every aspect of your life is far from being an ideal state of being for an adult, especially. Mm-hmm. We're born like that, but normally that's a state we want to get out of. And like, I remember colleagues, psychologists, that would say that basically your job is that you don't need me anymore as a therapist. So to me, like, it's kind of a balance with these two aspects.
And, just to be clear, David's the only one that had identified as a cat. And I'm more like a big moose.
Okay. Noted.
Back to you, Jim.
Okay. So I've been kind of like thinking of this theme. We're gonna wrap it up in like just a minute because we could just continue talking about this topic for a very, very long time. And the next few episodes are going to be talking about different parts of violence. Today, I kind of feel like it was just sort of an introduction discussion to it. And then we're going to get a little bit more specific with it. But I hear like what I've been hearing a few times coming up is that there's survival based violence, like animals, like the elephant thing defending themselves just so that defense, using violence as a defense for your life, your biological body and life. But then I'm also hearing that there's a social survival aspect of it as well. And as humans, we do have both.
Yep.
For sure. And I guess it's just a matter of tempering between the both, right? Like when is it appropriate to use violence? Yes, in survival situations. But then in cases of violence where like say lives are taken or something, is that a survival defense or is that a social defense in terms of war and things like that, you know? So like it's a very
these are very complex questions.
Yes. It's not so much a question. I'm just trying to I'm just wrapping up what I've been hearing from you guys. So we're not really gonna get into too much anymore for today. But I just want to ask you guys, just to pose a question. How are you feeling right now? We talked about coming in all peppy and a little apprehensive. Sun's starting to set now. But like after we just had this discussion, what's going on? Like we're leaving here today, like now from this, like a few episodes, I remember leaving really emotional myself after some of the episodes. What are we leaving with today?
I'm leaving pretty good. You know, it's like how I came in is how I'm leaving. I'm still
with that big smile. Yeah. Love that.
It's like it's Friday. There's 10 minutes left to the work day and
to your work day.
Yeah, I guess,
That's great. Yeah, that's great.
For me, I think this conversation was really, really stimulating, and I'm still kind of in my brain like thinking about all of the super like sometimes complex questions that we're raising. There's also a sense of the day is coming to an end, and I feel myself like nearing that state where will start like cracking weirder and weirder jokes. So it's a good point that we're stopping here.
I kind of wish you got to that state of cracking weird jokes
for the bloopers.
Yeah,
one day we'll get to that. Now, what I'm gonna say just seems ridiculous, but because it seems so poetic compared to. I'm just like noticing the light of the sunset, you know, and just appreciating that. Like there is a sense that, you know, we just sort of got like the toe into to something, and it feels fine. You know, it doesn't feel like we skirted around anything. It feels like there's just a lot to get in on this subject, and it feels there's no apprehension left, like that was there before. You know, feels like I appreciate the momentum, and it feels like the next step is just sort of a natural place to go to.
And we got here naturally also. And I hope like in future episodes, I think it's important that you said no one's skirting around any issues. I hope it continues that way. And yes, you can swear.
Yeah.
And
cool.
like, I want it to just be honest and just express. And yeah. So thank you for coming on the podcast again.
Yeah,
but how about you?
Yeah. Wow. Dodging bullets.
I didn't even think about that. Well, I'm okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're in a room with 3 professionals.
We're listening.
Oh no! I already had my counseling session
How do
today.
you really feel?
No, I just like like this, we've been trying to plan this since before the holidays. Again, we took a bit of a break there. So it feels really good to get back into the studio. And I always have a bit of my own apprehension coming on to do these things because I am very thoughtful and mindful about not taking the stage because it's not my stage. So like I feel good today that you guys feel really good about this. And I'm also like, oh man, I have so much more stuff to do today. But that's like not related to this podcast. So I'm still feeling busy. I'm just hyper focused right now. Hyper focused.
But we share the stage.
We share the stage.
You'll have just as much of the stage as the rest of us.
I agree.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I appreciate that.
Oh, that's how you get balance.
Balance comes back to that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you again. Thanks for the listeners. We will see you again in the next episode. Now.
The views and opinions of the guests expressed in this podcast do not reflect those of Udiwase and its employees.